One of the tightest groups of all was Group 5. Norway were in first position coming into the final round of matches, and just a draw would be good enough for them in Rotterdam against the Dutch, who were third behind the Czech Republic. Now, the Czech Republic were finishing up at home to Luxembourg, and it seemed that nothing but a win was on the cards there. So the Dutch knew what they had to do before a packed house, 49,000 in the Feyenoord Stadium. They simply had to win against one of the meanest defences in Europe, the Norwegians, who had led Group 5 for over a year. The Dutch making two changes from the side that came back from Malta, 4-0 winners, and they're two important ones as well. Dennis Bergkamp, who missed that game in Malta at the beginning of October through injury, back in the side in the number 10 jersey, and alongside him, fellow gunner Glenn Helder starts the match this time, came on as a substitute in that win over Malta by 4-0. On that occasion, it was Mark Overmars the Dutch had to thank, the brilliant winger, with a second-half hat-trick. And a side that lines up against Egil Olsen's Norway, finalists, of course, at the last World Cup. A nation with very limited resources of just 3 million people who've made fantastic strides in world football over the past decade. This could be the end of the line for both Egil Olsen and that ageing Norwegian side if they fail to clinch qualification, having already passed up 2 opportunities in the last 2 matches at home and away against the Czech Republic. So nearly 50,000 Dutch fans hoping to roar Hus Hiddink's side onto qualification. The Dutch did for England in this same stadium 2 years ago. And will, I wonder, it be the same for the Norwegians this evening? The Norwegians in the change strip of white shirts and black shorts. With all their Premier League stars on display, there are 3 changes to their lineup from the side that played that rather tepid friendly, frankly, against England in Oslo last month. Mark Overmars, Dennis Bergkamp with a shot that cannons off the defenders. And inside the first minute, the Dutch immediately on the attack. Well, Grodås in goal, Frode Grodås not called into a save there, replacing the injured Erik Thorsvedt. Erland Johnsen in to bolster the defence, and they preferred Erik Mikland at the start in the number 6 jersey, leaving Leon Hardson on the bench. 6 Ajax men, around which this Dutch side of Hus Hiddinks is built. Arthur Newman, the only non-Ajax man in the back 4, he of PSV. Frank de Boer picking out Helder. Tight to this near side touchline. Arthur Newman up supporting the attack, and Bergkamp arriving just too late as more dangers created in front of the goal of Frode Grodås. The Dutch without both Aaron Winter and, more importantly, Patrick Kluivert, both suspended. And in the last home match here against Belarus, Hiddink was critical of Bergkamp's performance after the match, which the Dutch edged with a goal from Yuri Mulder just 7 minutes from time. Well, the Schalke band has to make do with a place on the bench tonight. That's his reward for winning the game for Holland that night. If they hadn't got that result, then this match here would have been academic by now, and Norway would have been through. Away by Bjørneby. Here's Zeedorf. Bergkamp in a good position. Zeedorf goes for the return pass, just too far ahead of him. And Grodås is out quickly to smother the danger. Clarence Zeedorf, great responsibility on his shoulders tonight. The attacking midfielder has come through the Ajax Academy and now plays in Serie A, of course, with Sampdoria, in a very exciting midfield alongside Francis Karambeu. Witschke prompting and finding Ronald de Boer. Mark Overmars, tricky, quick. Frank de Boer can't pick out an orange shirt, and there's just the lone target up front for the Norwegians tonight. Jan Arge Fjørtoft playing his 56th international. The Middlesbrough man knows that he has to do it largely alone as Egil Olsen goes for an ultra-defensive lineup, because for Norway tonight here in Rotterdam, a draw will be good enough. First yellow card of the night. Frank de Boer for tugging the shirt of the Middlesbrough man. 1-1 in Oslo when these sides first met. That's one of just 4 goals the Norwegians have conceded as Henning Berg goes in on the free kick. He's been inspirational to the Norwegian side throughout this campaign, scored a crucial goal at home against the Czech Republic, but they were pegged back 5 minutes from time. Otherwise, Norway would have booked their qualification 2 matches ago. Lars Bohinen with the in-swinging corner, and Eddie van der Sar needs to make a second grab. Eddie van der Sar, who set a new league record this season, a club record, 845 minutes unbeaten in the Dutch First Division, where of course Ajax, imperious as ever, are sweeping all before them. Newman. De Boer muscled out of it, but keeps it going, skips round Lukken. Mikland blocks the path to goal. Nice dummy, Frank de Boer. Forward from Danny Blind. And Zeedorf, can he keep it in play? And the keeper with a touch behind, making absolutely certain there was nothing for Ronald de Boer to feed off. Young Frode Grodas, certainly not unnerved by the big occasion. And I'm sure the Norwegians will be happy to get in at half-time and keep it 0-0. Away by Erlend Jonsson. Fed in again. They're up in force here, plenty of orange shirts around the box, with Dennis Bergkamp tricking inside one man and then looking for Overmars on the far side, and the little man climbing high as both Berg and Jonsson go for the same ball, and Jonsson puts it behind for another corner kick. Referee tonight there in the penalty area, Dermot Gallagher from England. Lars Bohinen at the near post, formerly of Nottingham Forest and now with the champions Blackburn Rovers. Overhead kick from Frank de Boer, Zeedorf from long range, and they're getting closer. Headed out initially by Erlend Jonsson, and Dennis Bergkamp, who's slow coming out, goes to his legs. Well, if it had taken a touch and gone in, what I wonder would the referee's decision have been. So just to remind you, it's Norway currently leading Group 5, ahead of the Czech Republic, who one assumes must win against Luxembourg, and then Holland in 3rd place, 3 points behind the Norwegians. Helder on the outside, poor cross. And here's Erik Mikland. Fjortoft in the centre circle, Torreflo, but easy for Danny Blind and Mikkel Reitziger, who between them, well, they've always got a man over at the back, the Dutch side, and so far the Norwegians have been very cautious and fairly defensive minded. It just seems as if the rest of Europe has begun to read the Norwegian game, and to be honest, there isn't too much of it to work out. That's a wonderfully weighted ball from deep. Zeedorf, Ronald de Boer, one touch too many. Well, de Boer with the onerous task of filling the number 9 jersey, and I just wonder what Marco van Basten would have made of that chance, because it runs away from de Boer as he had Berg beaten but turned back outside the grounded Blackburn man again and wanted too much time. His 20th international. Eichel Camp was here in the last home match in that same position, as Hus Hiddink still finds it difficult to replace the brilliant and sadly missed Marco van Basten. A player of Van Basten's quality only comes along maybe once every 20 or 30 years. Helder's really ripping them to shreds on this near side. He certainly has the beating of the near veteran Carl Peter Lurken, the Rosenborg Trondheim man, who made his first appearance for Norway back in '87. He's not the oldest man in the team, Minnie Jakobsen, who's seen absolutely nothing of the ball so far, the number 11 with Rosenborg, the new Norwegian champions, yet again. There he is on the far side. And that ball was never reaching him. Jakobsen at 30, the eldest of a Norwegian side that I'm sure will begin to break up if they fail to surmount this final hurdle tonight in Rotterdam. Rekdal becomes the first Norwegian into referee Gallagher's book. And here they come again. Bergkamp and Roland de Boer, with Zeedorf supporting, are stretching the Norwegian backline, and they're playing with two out-and-out and outstanding wingers this evening. One has to say, Mark Overmars and Glenn Helder. It took a while to settle at Highbury, arrived in January, of course, for £1.2 million, one of George Graham's last signings, where Arsenal looked, and I understand do still look, to bolster the left flank. But he's now settling down in the new Premiership season, and has certainly established a great fan club there at Highbury, as he and Dennis Bergkamp have really kick-started theirs and Arsenal's season. And there he is, the man of the first half. Well, the Dutch flags may be waving here in the Feyenoord Stadium, but as yet there are still no goals to show for all the pressure and domination. Berg's header may fall for Glenn Helder, and a fist from Grodas. Bohinen can get it away, trying to dribble out of danger, and it's not away yet. Fed in again by Blind, but now there's a reprieve for the Norwegians. Beleaguered defence, but a strong defence it is of Olsen's. And that was a let-off, as Helder fastened onto that poor, misguided clearance of Henning Bergs, but failed to deliver the final volley. Jakobsen dispossessed by Michael Reiziger. Wave upon wave of orange attacks here in Rotterdam. A ground that's been good to the Dutch over the years, especially when it matters, the big occasion, the European champions of 1988, beating the former Soviet Union in Germany. A final which saw a stunning goal from Van Basten and a first half header from Ruud Gullit. Two of the great players to wear the Dutch orange shirt of recent years. De Boer, who's been something of a disappointment in this first period. Blind on the far side to the tricky Overmars. Again, it's a super cross from Overmars onto the head of Dennis Bergkamp. And although Dennis is not noted for his heading ability, clear sight of goal there as Overmars cleverly looked up and weighted a superb ball into the box, where Bergkamp found himself just underneath the ball and unable to get the power to direct the header downwards. But see how he loses his marker. Both Berg and Jonsson being put under the microscope here this evening. Here comes Zeedorf again. He's been involved in everything. 1-2 with Bergkamp, but this is a great chance, but it's squandered. They are just lacking the calm finish inside the box where it matters. You can see there how Zeedorf was so intelligently set up by Bergkamp, and he allowed the ball to run away from his feet. That's a foul by Erlend Jonsson on Bergkamp. And Jonsson may have had a case there, however. Right at the end of the first period, it gives the Dutch one final opportunity to open the scoring. Into the wall. And you do feel that Huss Hiddink's side just need that spark the confidence a goal would give them, but after 45 minutes here in the Feyenoord Stadium, the two nations going at half-time in the first period from the Norwegians, fielding 5 players from the English Premier League, of course. Erlend Jonsson, Henning Berg, Stig Bjørneby, Lars Bohinen, Jan Åge Fjørtoft, who's had really nothing to work with up front, as we get underway in the second half. Still at 0-0. And the Norwegians immediately showing a little more endeavour. Right at the start of the second period. I think that's the first attack where I've seen them support Fjørtoft. And here they come again. Flow from the byline and underneath the crossbar. Good catch from Van der Sar. Has now made the Dutch goalkeeping position very much his own. And that was tricky with Jan Åge Fjørtoft just making sure that the Dutch keeper knew he was around. Guus Hiddink, who's had his critics through this campaign, having taken over from Dick Advocaat when the whole of Holland were hoping to see the appointment go to Johan Cruyff, very much the people's choice. And this could be the opener for Holland. It is. It comes on 48 minutes. And a bizarre goal to the name of Clarence Seedorf. And you'll see on the replay, agony for defender Erlend Jonsson, because his clearance cannons off the body of the Sampdoria man. And the ricochet looping over stranded keeper Grudas to give the Dutch the goal they had been looking for. No denying that Holland deserved to take the lead, but it comes here in outrageous circumstances. A great stroke of good fortune for the Dutch, and 3 minutes after the restart, at last they have the breakthrough. And how different it was all looking for Holland back at the beginning of the summer when they lost 2 critical games back-to-back, 3-1 in the Czech Republic, and then outrageously in June they went down by 1-0 in Belarus. But they're on their way here at last in Rotterdam. A goal from that man, Clarence Seedorf. Well, all he'll point to is tomorrow morning's newspapers that show him as the goal scorer. Never mind the circumstances, they all count. And perhaps in a match of this importance, that's just what you need. And the Norwegians now in a position that they hate having to come from behind and change their tactics. They'll need to chase this game if they're to get back into it. Only an outright win for the Dutch will be good enough, and even then they may well have to face a playoff at Anfield, because their record, should they win this one, amongst the second place sides is not a good one. Helder goes outside his man, teasing Lurken, who's had a nightmare, and over his own bar by Erlend Jonsson. Provider of the opening goal, but no blame to the Chelsea man. Great misfortune for him, joy in the Dutch camp, and Seedorf has made his mark. Has certainly added thrust and impetus to this Dutch lineup. Overmars with the corner kick. Before then, Olsen wants to bring on Øyvind Leonhardsen. Off goes Erik Mikland. And on comes the bustling, busy midfield man. On the wrong end of a drubbing Nottingham Forest in his last Premier League encounter, and immediately defending this corner kick by the post. It'll come out to the goal scorer Seedorf this time. Can't hit the target. So Norway do need a goal. A draw for the Dutch will not be good enough. And I can't remember a scene where the Dutch keeper Van der Sar has seriously been threatened. The qualifiers, if anything, have gone on just a couple of months too long for a nation that has just finished their own domestic season. They're not used to playing football through our winter, and their winter too, which is far worse than ours, of course. And just for the statisticians amongst you, Rosenborg Trondheim have just wrapped up the league by a massive 15 points. Bohinen looking for one of the stars of that Rosenborg side, who are still involved in the Champions League, of course. Mini Jakobsen there. Flo gets a cross in. That's the second time he's done that from the byline, but there's nobody behind Fjørtoft. And the chance goes a-begging. Well, the Norwegians are going to have to start piling more bodies forward now if they're to make a game of this. And at the same time, of course, they will run the risk of being exposed at the back. Rugged features of Erlend Johnsen. Seedorf. Danny Blint. Square. Arthur Neumann. On the far side, Glenn Helder. Well worth feeding him. The Dutch have a substitute on. It's Johan de Kook. Blint again. No offside flag. And Ronnie de Boer. Well, that's the closest he's come. Flashing header from de Boer. It was just behind him. He did well. And that one wasn't too far away from giving the Dutch a second goal. Surely they'll need that to make the game absolutely safe. In the meantime, back come the Norwegians. And Haaland, who's come on as a substitute on the end of that header, but couldn't guide it down into the path of the supporting players. Alf Inge Haaland. And it's Lukken who's been withdrawn, so they are now taking defenders off the pitch and looking to support the front man, Jan Åge Fjørtoft, who's been ploughing a lone furrow for much of the game. Overmars is stopped in his tracks. Good tackle too. Lars Bohinen needs a spark of magic from him. Something might be happening here. Now they've got 4 men up on this raid from Haaland on the far side. Needs a good cross, and it's just behind Fjørtoft. Agonizingly so for the Middlesbrough striker. Formerly, of course, with Swindon Town. And now part of that resurgence at the new Riverside Stadium on Teesside. And already a goal scorer with an assist from Juninho making his debut. Ståle Solbakken is on for Lars Bohinen, who had taken a knock. And the Dutch are still leading by a goal to nil deep into the second half. The Czech Republic by this time were ahead in their game against Luxembourg, so it was all going wrong for Norway. A side perhaps now past their best, and if they don't make the trip to England, then we can expect to see both Olsen passing the reins over to a younger man. I'm sure that he will go, and Norway will have to look to their resources and start to refashion a new team. Here's the goal scorer. And Erlend Johnsen and Henning Berg between them, keeping the ball away from Dennis Bergkamp, who has faded somewhat in this second half, it has to be said. And the break on for Norway now, 3 against 3. Here goes Flo, they're backing off, still Flo into the penalty area. Back for Haaland, will he try the shot? No, it's a chip for Fjørtoft, and that's the best opportunity that Norway have created in the whole match so far, and Jan Åge Fjørtoft holds his head in his hands because he knows Norway may not get many more opportunities, certainly not one as good as that, but he couldn't hit the target. Van der Sar didn't need to make a save, and the Norwegians still trail. Henning Berg forward, typical Route 1 play from the Norwegians. Here goes Seedorf. That's a superb ball, almost getting Overmars in. Here's Rekdal. Jakobsen has hardly been seen. They've given it away again, and 1 or 2 heads going down. And on the break now, Seedorf picking out Overmars. He only has to feed Yuri Mulder, who's come on as a substitute. And for the second home international in a row, Mulder scores a vital goal for his side. And the Dutch now surely are through to next summer's finals on 87 minutes as the Norwegians pushed forward, caught, exposed at the back, 2-on-1. Mark Overmars doing the sensible thing, a square ball in for the Schalke player, and enough time to tee up the shot before burying it beyond Frode Grodås, and the Norwegians down and out surely at 2-0 with just 3 minutes on the clock. "50,000 Dutch voices raised in celebration. The flags are flying. The whole city of Rotterdam turns orange this evening. And what a disaster for the Norwegians. Twice they had opportunities to wrap up this group in their 2 previous matches, and they're to pay the penalty of pushing upfield as they concede a 3rd goal. Well, that's harsh, in fact, on Norway. But on 89, Mark Overmars' solo after a 40-yard run seals victory on a great night for Holland. When the chips were down and it mattered, once again the Dutch have come through, just as they did against England 2 years ago. And Overmars, another superb performance from him, a winger who can score goals as well as create. It's the final nail in the Norwegian coffin. At 3-0, the Dutch will now certainly get into 2nd place, and we know that they will have to play off in Liverpool on December the 13th if they are to make the finals in 1996. A job well done for Hus Hiddink. 3 goals all in the second half, and the Dutch are there.